the Bigfoot Manifesto, where progressive politics, blurry cryptids, and the monsters hiding in American power all get dragged out of the woods and into the daylight. Today's guest is Howard Polskin, president, founder, and chief curator of TheRighting, a media company that aggregates headlines from conservative news outlets and publishes original reporting on right-wing media. TheRighting launched in 2017 and now includes a website, a free daily newsletter, social media, traffic reports, podcast reports, and guides to the conservative media ecosystem. Howard spent the first half of his career as a journalist, including writing extensively about television news for TV Guide, and later worked in public relations and corporate communications, including at CNN. Since launching TheRighting, he has written about right-wing media for outlets including the Columbia Journalism Review, Media Post, Media Shift, and Mediate. This episode is about a very simple question. What happens when millions of Americans are living inside a completely different media weather system? One powered by grievance, fear, anti-woke panic, celebrity pundits, Trump-centric loyalty test, and headlines designed to make every political disagreement feel like the end of civilization. Because Bigfoot may be hard to find, but the right-wing media machine, that thing is in your uncle's inbox, your neighbor's Facebook feed, your YouTube recommendations, your podcast app, your cable package, your local diner, and probably the phone vibrating in someone's pocket right now. So, hey, everyone, let's welcome Howard Polskin to the Bigfoot Manifesto. Thanks for coming on, Howard. You are quite the mensch, I have to say, for what you do, what you have to read and watch daily. But so thanks for coming on.
It's a tough job. Someone's got to do it.
So Howard, for listeners who have never visited TheRighting, what problem were you trying to solve when you created it?
Wow. So I thought that I was a smart person. I read the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, New York Post, watched NBC Nightly News, read Time Magazine, and then in 2016, Donald Trump was elected president. And I was like, how did that happen? And I decided the next day to go to sites like foxnews.com, which I had never been on, nationalreview.com, Breitbart, InfoWars, and it was a whole other world that opened up before me. And there was half the country was looking at the political environment in a completely different way. And that's when I started my journey.
Wow. So, yeah, it's been quite the journey because I've been following your site, here and there. I come on it sometimes just to see what's up there, to track what's going on. Because I used to watch like Fox News up to about 2014, 15. And as a gonzo journalist friend of mine, Mike Edison, says it'll put hair on your chest, which I don't know, it was quite that, but I like to know, what was going on. So, I mean, it's good that you have this, aggregator to see what's out there. Cause now it's at a pace it's so hard to keep up with. I mean, it must just keep you busy all the time.
Constantly.
Yeah.
I'm working 7 days, probably like you. I'm working 7 days a week. I have a few hours during the day where I walk around the block, but generally this is all I'm doing. Yep.
So, all right. So touching on the 2016 election, a lot of liberals asked the same question. How did this happen? Was TheRighting partly an answer to that question? Was that so that was your answer to the question, right?
I started looking at right-wing sites, not thinking I would create TheRighting. But after, doing this for about 6 weeks, I decided I have trouble retaining information. The only way I retain information if I write it down. So what I started doing is every day I would go to these sites and I would just write the headlines down. And then and just create a Word document. And then after a month, I looked at it and I was like, wow, this really tells a story how right-wing media is thinking about the political environment. There's got to be a newsletter that can send me these headlines. And there wasn't any. And that's when I knew that, I guess it's me.
Yeah, you definitely, you filled in a gap, definitely. So, what do mainstream liberal audiences misunderstand about right-wing media?
Yes, good question, Dave. They think that everything coming from the right is wrong. There's an immediate assumption that it's suspect.
Mm-hmm.
And originally I was in that camp. And that's very dangerous because, there's a lot underneath a lot of the emotions and that the hyper the hype that there's it bears some intellectual scrutiny, and that's what I bring to it. Like, I try and look at everything that I read and try and find, where's the kernel of truth, where is this coming from. Sometimes I will admit it's all coming from a place of hate and racism and anti-Semitism, but not everything. And it takes some skill to find out what is true and what is not true.
Yeah, it really does. Well, kind of following into that question, like, so how do you decide, which headline captures the heart and soul of the conservative media conversation on any given day? Because there's so much, right? When you first started, it probably wasn't as hard, but now it seems like there's so much more you have to dissect. Like, how do you decide which ones?
Usually there's a theme emerges, and there'll be 2 or 3 things every day that capture the attention of right-wing media. And a lot of it is really what mainstream media is writing about, but it's the flip side. So, for instance, today there's a lot about Graham Plattner.
Yeah.
So he's the pinata of the week right now. He is not having a good week. Jill Biden's memoir is getting slammed, justifiably, I might add, by right-wing media. So it usually, things come up, and it's very apparent. And it's like when I wake up in the morning, I pretty much know what I'm going to be focusing on, because I'm really following a lot of the headlines. Sometimes, things come out of left field. For instance, this morning, there was an article in right-wing press that is urging Taylor Swift to headline the Trump's concert in Washington over 4th of July. That if she owes the country so much, her success.
But I just got invited to perform on that, so they're getting desperate.
Sometimes when something comes out of left field, you have to put it in there, and that's what kind of makes the job fun, because you're always funny. Pleasantly surprised.
It was actually my next question. You just answered that. You were asking about, because I was going to ask you, like when you get up in the morning and start reading and stuff, like, are you looking for the most extreme example or a more revealing one?
Well, that's what, listen, Dave, we're both in the business of chasing audience, keeping the attention of the audience. So I will admit, I look for colorful headlines that may provoke some intellectual discussion or outrage. But if it's too outrageous, I get too many unsubscribes. Like, there are people, like, sometimes I know when I go over the line, like, all of a sudden I'll get 15 people will unsubscribe, and I know I've pissed them off. I went too far.
Yeah.
And we work very hard for our loyal audience members.
Yes.
And we do not like losing them.
Yes. It's, because it's hard. And, this is something I've been saying for the last 10 years plus now, actually a little longer than 10 years, I think. But I've been saying the hardest job in media right now is writing for The Onion. I literally think that's the hardest job. And they still nail it every time. They're still undefeated. I'm like, it's really the hardest job. I'm like, how can they beat this headline? And they still do it every day. So, kudos to The Onion. I hope, they keep going for forever, because I've always said, like, in this day, it's the worst, like the toughest job to have in writing. All right.
And there's a right-wing answer to The Onion called the Babylon Bee. Yeah.
It's so funny, though. I follow them too. And actually, I do get some, they're not as good as The Onion, but, they pick on the right too. They don't, they like, I've noticed it, like, they go after Trump a lot, I've noticed lately. And they've had some funny stuff. I'll send it out. I'm like, if it's funny, I'll send it out, if it's true, it's not as good as The Onion, but they definitely have had some real heaters in there.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, okay. So here's a question, Howard, so what's the difference between monitoring right-wing media and doom scrolling it? What's the difference?
Wow. Good question. Wow. That's doom scrolling is going through all of it and going like, oh my God, the world is falling apart. The country's going to hell. Our democracy's going up in flames. We'll never be rid of MAGA. Doing the writing is more like a scientist looking at the Ebola virus through a microscope and analyzing it and thinking and trying to say, where, how does this virus mutate? Where does it come from? How do we get rid of it? So, one is more, doom scrolling is more emotional. Doing the writing is more intellectual.
Interesting. So the other thing, because you're like going on about 10 years of doing this. So do right-wing media
9 years.
9 years. Yeah, almost 10. Do right-wing outlets operate as a media ecosystem, or is it more like a loose network of personalities, sites, algorithm, newsletters, and incentives?
It's definitely not like a monolithic body. There you will get splits in thinking on various things, like the war with Iran, for instance. That's a pretty notable thing. Most of the time, though, it is squarely behind Donald Trump and very pro MAGA. So that's the big. So, but I still think it sways a lot of the thinking in this country, and there's no question that Fox News prime time is one of the biggest influencers of right-wing thought, and especially among the voting public. But there's enough voices in various platforms, websites, podcasts that offer different opinions as well. You have some that are really far-right cuckoo, like Candace Owens, who's got a huge podcast following. And her business, the business model is outrage. That's really what it is. And not everyone, thank God, follows that model.
Real quickly off of like a Candace Owens or something like that. I mean, do you think they're genuine, or you think it's shtick?
I'm not sure, but I've asked that question of myself.
Right?
I read the recent Tucker Carlson biography.
Yeah.
And one of the things that came out that was so interesting in the biography, going back to his time when he was on CNN, like a quarter of a century ago, and he admitted in the book that he would take certain positions because it was expected of him, and that would keep the audience keep tuning in.
Interesting.
So, and I think that those of us who are in the media game, and I've found myself sometimes doing things because I think that maybe the audience will like it, but try and really watch myself on that. It's a dangerous game.
Speaking of Tucker Carlson, give a little shout out. I'm not going to name her because I don't want to name her, but she's a fabulous writer and a really good friend. But I never knew. And she told me just a few years ago that she grew up with Tucker Carlson and went to school with him. And she said he was an asshole in school too. So, and also another shout out to another friend of mine, Hacksaw, who's been on the show. We did an episode together with Andrea Chalupa, but he also went to high school with Dan Bongino and said he hasn't changed. Said he's the same guy. Yeah, he showed me his high school yearbook picture. I'm like, oh yeah, makes sense. So here's a question. This one too, Howard, and I don't even know, maybe you could throw out an example or not. But so how quickly can a fringe talking point move from one of these small outlets that you monitor to like Fox News, Congress, or even like Trump's social feed?
It's funny you should ask. So 2 years ago, I hired an intern and she monitored Trump's website, donaldtrump.com, when he was running in 2024. And she monitored all the articles he linked to. And it was shocking how many tiny, extreme right-wing websites he was citing.
Because he just doesn't care. Yeah.
And it was so it was very clear that these small websites, virtually inconsequential, were getting into his head and influencing his thought and what he was saying to the country. Additionally, and he often says, if you're a close Donald Trump watcher, he often says, people are saying this. What he means by that is he read something on Breitbart or One American News That's really what he's saying. So, I take anything that's published on the right could at someday influence not only what may be said on Fox News, but more importantly, what may come out of the White House, the Donald Trump White House.
That's interesting. Nice job to give to the intern, by the way. She must be tough. Bigfoot leaves blurry evidence in the woods. Right wing media leaves very clear evidence in headlines. Who the enemy is this week.
When you look at,
yes,
he's not hiding anything.
No,
it's all there.
I was trying to contrast it because I was trying, make my cryptid, points about this, and it's like, you know who the enemy is this week. What fear is being sold this week, what grievance is being activated, and what the story audience is being trained to repeat. It's like, it's clearly out there. So now I want to move to the next segment. I want to talk about outrage as a business model. So the first question I have for you is, when you look at the traffic data, what can it tell us that vibes and headlines can't?
Wow. What can it tell us? Well, first of all,
it's interesting, like how you said, when you've gone too far with the crazy headlines, you get unsubscribes. Is there something like that?
No, I don't think it doesn't work like that. For right-wing media. Yeah. And, like most things, I think I think the traffic. Opposite. Yeah. The traffic is dependent on social media algorithms,
Yeah.
Google search, and the amount of content that's being posted every day. And certainly now, right-wing news outlets have so many different platforms to go to. So for instance, just an hour ago, before going on this podcast, I just saw a document from Fox News boasting about how many views they're getting on YouTube. And so I hadn't seen that before. So that's enough. So, all of these sites are constantly looking to connect with their audience on whatever platform they can find them at.
Yeah, definitely. Well, talking about traffic and so forth, are we seeing right-wing audience growth, fragmentation, or are we seeing audience fatigue at this point?
Every news website this year, including mainstream that I follow, has declined, except Truth Social. Everyone.
That was my next question. That was my I was gonna follow up with that, which is interesting because I made a Truth Social account, and it's the weirdest platform I've ever seen. Is anyone actually on there, or is it mostly bots?
Howard Polskin is twice a day.
I'm going to start following you on Truth Social.
I only follow one person, Donald Trump. So I before going to bed, I see what he's posted. And when I get up in the morning, I see what he's posted. So for instance, and this alarmed me, this weekend, he had, in a 36-hour period, he had more than 70 Truth Social posts. This is the leader of the free world.
Yes.
And he had, I'd say, about at least a dozen had alarming images created by AI. For instance, of him with George Washington on horseback, dressed like it's 1776, riding across the White House lawn as race cars zoomed across it as well, with the presidential plane flying up in the sky. Like
my favorite. What was my favorite image I just saw of him? He had himself standing on the moon with the in an astronaut outfit with the flag in his hand with no helmet on.
That's very good.
I kid you not. Look, it's up there. I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
Dave, isn't this? Yes, we can laugh at it, but
but it's serious. This is like scary.
That is like, don't you have a war to run? Don't you have an economy to tame? Don't you have a strait to open? Like, come on. This is, and here's the thing, Dave.
He's an incompetent. He's always been
Who's helping him?
I know.
Isn't that the most important job in the administration?
My mom's positive it's all Stephen Miller behind this.
Like, someone's staying up with him in the middle of the night doing this.
Yeah.
So, it's
So, Yeah, because the Truth Social thing, I don't understand. I don't really think it's a social network because there's nothing on there. Like, you know, I I finally went on it and made one for my podcast, and it was like, all right, let me go, poke the bear a little bit, because I always like getting under their skin. I got a few libtard things and all that sort of stuff, but almost like it's like crickets over there a little bit. Like,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
very little interaction. I mean, so to me, it just seems like it's Trump's like personal wire service.
Yeah, 100%. And I
Yeah.
think that all that traffic are people like me and you going there to see what
All
he's
right.
posted.
One I want to talk about here too is the Daily Wire. It built a massive brand around pundit personalities. Okay, so and I noticed on your site talking about it. I'm like, what does its recent traffic decline suggest, if anything, about the durability of that model? I mean, is it what
I
are you seeing
mean,
from that?
first of all, they, on the plus side, kudos to them for coming up with with probably the strongest podcast network in right wing
Yeah,
media.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that's where they've excelled.
No, yeah, I'm not taking. I mean, that's why I want to say, I said it's a
Yeah.
massive brand.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna short those guys because I know how hard
Yeah.
this stuff is.
I think that the website is old and pokey.
Yeah,
Not that needs to be refreshed. I don't find the story selection interesting. They're not really breaking stories. Their commentary doesn't do anything for me. So it's not surprising that the traffic has fallen off more than almost any other right wing website
wow.
this
Yeah,
year.
I didn't
I
realize
mean,
it had been that bad till I read your piece on it there.
and to their, they produce some good documentaries. I mean, successful for them. And I think 2 years ago, Matt Walsh's documentary was the top grossing documentary of the year theatrically.
Yeah.
But they branched into entertainment television programming, children's programming, and I don't think it's been successful at all. And that's daunting. Like what you're going up against Disney or Nickelodeon,
Yeah.
like what? So I didn't quite get that, and I'm sorry to say I was right.
Yeah, yeah, definitely right. So how much should we trust traffic data, in a media environment where companies, dispute measurement, audiences are moving across apps and algorithms change overnight? Like, how much should we trust, this traffic data that we're seeing?
Well, now I have been tracking audiences on various media outlets since the 90s. And I used to do that for CNN. And everyone's got a problem with traffic measurement or audience measurement. But as I like to say, everyone needs a God to pray to, no matter how flawed that God is. So the thing is, what I try and do is I use the same measurement service. I get the same information month after month after month. And yeah, if it's bad, like I'm just I just put it out there and I say it like it is. And I've had times where InfoWars has thanked me for pointing out their traffic growth, and Dan Bongino has thanked me as well. And other times, they're royally pissed at me, and Daily Wire hasn't been happy with me. So, that's just the way it is. And, I figure if I'm annoying half the people and the other half are happy with me, I'm doing my job.
So, like, thinking of podcasts, like, do podcasts create a deeper kind of loyalty than websites? I guess because people are literally spending hours with the same voice in their ears. So, do you think there's there's a bigger loyalty now to podcasts than websites?
Podcasts are very seductive platform.
Yeah.
And it's because, so I go to the gym 3 times a week for 75 minutes, and the podcast is in my ear, and it's very reassuring. And the people I like listening to, it's like an old friend talking to me. So, there's a reason why so many companies and so many media personalities are getting into the podcast game. But as you know,
Yeah.
it's harder than it looks.
Yeah, it's a lot harder than it looks. There's a lot of effort into this. People don't realize it's a lot of work. Of course, I make it harder on myself, but for production value wise, but that's just me. So is there a point where the audience gets exhausted, or does the machine just find a new villain and keep going?
Yes, I've had periods where the audience has tailed off, for sure.
Yeah.
So, for instance,
give us an example.
Yes, right after Trump was elected 18 months ago, all of a sudden, for like 2 months, the open rates in my newsletter dropped. No one was signing up and people were unsubscribing. And then I was like, oh my God, people just could not take it. They were so freaked out that Trump was reelected. And now they've come back.
Yeah, what I've been saying about the right-wing media is, their ecosystem, it just doesn't, it's not just reporting fear, it's like been franchising fear at this point. I mean, and it's everything. I've talked about this so many times. It's the same right-wing playbook that, from Goebbels on up, they've been using. It's the same thing over and over. And, people just, I've talked about this many times too, but Americans are really bad with history, and and they think we're immune from, lessons of history because we're so special here.
I mean, one of the things I like to say is that in 1968, speaking of lessons of history, George Wallace, an avowed segregationist at the time, got almost 14% of the popular vote for president. Of course, it was mainly in the South.
Yeah,
but like that is frightening.
Yeah, and I actually, I'm not sure if this is true, but I remember when Trump won. I thought I saw a statistic about George Wallace was that he actually got more black voters than Trump, or a higher percentage. I heard that. I'm going to look that up because I remember hearing that, and it sounded like it was from a truthful source. I can't remember. But my final thought in this segment is I jotted this down about Bigfoot. I was thinking Bigfoot supposedly survives people because people keep telling the story. The right-wing media outrage machine survives because the story is monetized, repeated, optimized, clipped, podcasted, emailed, algorithmically recommended, and converted into political identity. It took me a lot to think of that one, but that's
Did you write all that? You wrote all that down?
Yes.
That's brilliant.
There's a lot of years. So this was actually a hard episode for me to write, Howard, tell you the truth, is because there's just so much. And I was like, I literally was just, even up to we got on, I was like writing things down. I was like, oh man, I should change this and change that. I think I have my open, you'll hear it later when the episode's out, but it's the longest one. So next, let's talk about the narrative factory, about woke, crime, immigration, gender, race, rigged elections, all the good stuff. Are you seeing similar templates week after week, or are they changed?
Yeah, stuff. Well, certainly Pride Month is going to be big. That I would, it got off to a slow start by being attacked by the right, basically because of Scott Pelley's outburst with the new head of 60 Minutes on Monday.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to pick up steam this month, and it certainly did last year. It really reveals a very strong homophobic inclination on the part of the right. A reliable punching bag prior to, especially during the Biden administration, was a drag queen story hour. That really inflamed the right. And, I always like to say, I just wish that the left would just drop drag queen story hour. It doesn't, you're making enemies that way. It's too much of a juicy target for the right. So.
Yeah, well, it's funny. It's interesting, though, is like the mainstream media. One of the things, because, you always see the story, every day. It seems like every day you see some MAGA guy being arrested for, child pornography or soliciting sex with a minor. And, but you never see mainstream media. You never see those stories, really in mainstream media. You'll see them, in local news outlets.
Right.
You don't see them in the mainstream media, but they'll report, they'll report about, all these, painting over pride crosswalks and things like that. But, I think why not mention that, saying, hey, look, no drag queen has been arrested for raping a child, but, all these MAGA personalities who have,
it just, the thing is, Dave, it seems to inflame the right and also the audience that's in the political center. Sometimes I think it moves them a little bit a step to the right, especially when they go to vote.
Well, I mean, I always say these guys that are getting arrested have always been deflecting. Yeah, I've always said they're deflecting.
Certainly vaccinations is a that's a big thing. It gets wrapped up in it's freedom. It's my choice not to get vaccinated.
Yeah.
So that's always a big theme, and of course that goes to masking during COVID. And as we recall from 6 years ago, Trump just hardly ever wore a mask.
Yeah.
And, he made it as a point of pride.
Yeah.
And, so that's a recurring theme. Getting the jab, again, vaccination.
Yeah.
So that's always up. Let me think what other themes. I mean, those are some of the big ones. And of course, transgender rights.
Yeah.
That gets, the Democrats get positioned as the party of transgender rights.
Yeah.
And, that puts the Democrats in a challenging position, I think.
Yeah. I just, once again, it's like the moral outrage over people that aren't even like 0.1% of the population or whatever it is.
Right.
It's just insane. It's like, to me, it's insanity. It's just, it's just fear mongering at its worst. And, June, you're going to be busy this month because you got Gay Pride Month and you got Juneteenth. That's real. This is like
Trump's 80th birthday and the nation's 250th birthday.
Yeah.
And the insanity that's taking place on the White House lawn.
I know. I just saw like a meme. The best meme I saw, they had an overhead picture of the UFC thing and like the demolished, wing of the White House where the ballrooms going, and someone said it looks like a Six Flags after a hurricane. I was like, it's perfect because you see the wrecked like ballroom demolished or whatever, and then you got that big. It's ridiculous. I mean, did you see Idiocracy?
Yeah, I was going to say, and I said, you probably don't even know that reference, but this is what the country's become. Idiocracy.
It is. And I always said Mike Judge predicted like 500 years in the future. He didn't realize it was going to be 10 years in the future from when he made that film. And you look at the picture of the White House, it's like, I've been waiting for the above ground pool in the White House lawn. I'm just waiting for that. A couple cars up on blocks, he's buying stolen catalytic converters, from people trying to get those precious metals. All right. So I got a couple more questions, Howard. So how does right-wing media handle stories that are inconvenient for Trump and the MAGA leaders? How do they handle those?
They avoid
them.
They ignore it.
They just ignore it.
That's basically what happens.
It's really amazing because, I always feel like, he's so handled, like they must like have to hide so much stuff from him. So he doesn't so he isn't constantly blowing a gasket because, he probably doesn't realize how hated he is like around the world, like how despised he is. He
does.
Do you think he does?
Well, he knows, but he positions it as, the crazies, the Democrats, he justifies it in a certain way.
And why does he take the B out of Democrats? Why don't you keep the B in? He takes it out.
Hey, you're asking me to understand what's going on in his head?
Yeah.
A crazy person's head? I have no idea.
Like, why does he take the B out?
Dave,
he probably doesn't know there's a B in dumb. That's it.
I am on Truth Social every day. I read everything he writes. He has no sense of grammar or spelling, capitalization, what he
I know.
It's like
it's
he
brutal.
could not pass a 5th grade writing essay test. You'd get an F.
I know. It's like, it's literally like he ate a can of alphabet soup and just shit it out,
Yeah.
It really is.
Again, idiocracy.
It's truly amazing. And too, it's like, as a lot of my friends and listeners know, my mother's from Italy. So half my family lives in Italy, and like, they're just like, some of them are just amazed at it. They just can't believe it. They're like, are you like, it's just, you have to convince them, no, this is happening. This is real.
This is real. This is real.
Yeah.
This is real.
Yeah. It's so crazy. So, all right. So here's a question for someone like me who's a progressive. What do progressives do with this information without simply amplifying the bad faith framing?
I've thought a lot about that.
Yeah, I figured you did. It's like, it was a big question for you. That's why I waited towards the end for this one.
Sadly, I don't have an answer. Like what can be done? What can be done? In February 2017, just a few weeks into his first presidency, I kept saying, when are the adults showing up to like kick him out of the White House? This can't stand.
Yeah.
This guy doesn't know what he's doing. This is a disaster. And I think that here we are in 2026, and it's still standing. My only hope is that the country is strong enough, our institutions are strong enough that we can withstand this. And some days I feel we are strong enough, and other days I feel that we're in grave peril. And I think that the midterms will be a real test. There are days that I think that the midterms won't happen.
Howard, I can ask my friends on this. I've been saying this. I said, after he got elected, I said, he will probably declare martial law and not have the midterms.
Yeah. I mean,
that's been my prediction for a while. That's my prediction. That's been prediction for a while.
We've always done with Donald Trump, the mistake we've made, mainstreamers and progressives, we constantly underestimate him.
Yeah. I agree.
We think that he won't go there.
Yeah, because they're like, that can't. It's the American thing of the United States. That can't happen here. That can't happen here. We can't have a dictatorship here. There's no way that can happen. And I'm like, I assure you it can happen. I can't. Like, I've been saying this since 2016. I've been going on for 10 years about this.
Well, so
wow, that's great, Howard. Another person that's
with that, yeah. So I'm just thinking, there's nothing that he won't do to stay in power. That's
what I mean. I was even surprised when he lost in 2020 and did the January 6th, because I saw that coming, and I was like, watch this thing. It's going to be him out. And people are like, it won't happen there. They'll have the National Guard and the police will stop it. I'm like, no, they won't. No, they won't. Because who's got to call up the National Guard? He does, And I knew that was going to happen. And I said, he's probably, and then I thought, when he made a mistake here, this is where he made a mistake. He didn't stay in office. He didn't leave the White. I was like, he's either too chicken shit or he's stupid. I couldn't figure out which one it was, because I was like, he's not going to leave. That's what I thought. But I'm like, and then he left. I said, well, he's either stupid, he didn't realize the moment he had there, or he is a coward at heart. All bullies are cowards at heart. That guy talks like a tough guy. Guaranteed he's never bet in a fight in his life.
Right. Right.
Never. He never has, you can tell. All right. So my last question, is the goal to win an argument now or break the spell? Where are we at?
When you say win, you mean with people on the right?
Yes. Yeah.
I never try and win an argument with anyone.
You can't. Yeah.
It's not. You're chasing this is how I approach it.
You can put up every stat you want, anything, and I don't believe that.
I just try and understand the position. There are people in right-wing media that I talk to that I'm friendly with. And so, for instance, after the school shooting in Uvalde, I was like, are we not sick of people having guns?
Yeah.
So much for a good guy with a gun. We've got to get it. So, but I try not to make that mistake anymore. Every now and then something gets the best.
Yeah.
I try. Yeah.
I got worn out of the Second Amendment, argument all the time. Because I have my education background is in history and foreign policy and things like that. And I was like trying to explain the difference between, 18th century warfare, and explaining, levies and militias, and that you couldn't feed these giant armies. So, you like to keep a well-regulated militia to call them up in case of war. You can't explain that to them. It's like they don't want to understand the economics or just the logistics of armies, pre-Napoleon, so they'll never get that. Well, Howard, we're at the end here. But hey, I really will thank you for coming on, and we got to do this again. I really enjoyed having you on.
I'm very impressed with you.
I really love this, Howard. I was like really excited that you came on. This has been one of probably the most fun I've had. Not to degrade any other guests because they're all great, but I really had fun with this one. You made it really easy on me.
Well, thanks, Dave.
Okay, and keep checking out Howard's site, The Writing.
Yep.
Go ahead, do your plug, Howard.
No, yeah, The Writing, and it's RIGHTING.
Yeah, we'll have it in the in our script for the show and everything for the episode. So we'll have a link.
The newsletter is free.
It's free. Yes. So thanks again, Howard, and we'll talk soon.
All right, Dave. Thank you. Stay in touch. Bye.
Here's a takeaway, folks. You don't have to agree with right-wing media to take it seriously. In fact, you ignore it at your own peril, because this is where the stories are tested. This is where villains are named. This is where fear gets packaged. This is where yesterday's fringe talking point becomes tomorrow's campaign ad, congressional hearing, Facebook argument, or school board meltdown. Howard Polskin's work at The Writing gives mainstream, liberal, and middle-of-the-road audiences a map of that force. Not so we can wander in and get lost, not so we can amplify every poisonous headline, but so we can understand what millions of people are being told before those stories crash into real life. Bigfoot may be folklore, but the outrage ecosystem is measurable. It has traffic reports, subscriber charts, daily headlines, podcast rankings, algorithms, donor networks, celebrity pundits, and a business model that turns fear into loyalty. So thanks to Howard Polskin for helping us track the creature through the media woods, because if we want to understand American politics, we have to understand not what people believe, but who is telling them what to fear. Thank you, and please join us again next week. And give us a rating if you can, or drop me a message. Thank you. Bye.